The COVID lab theory, as it's sort of been known. So the idea that the COVID virus came from the Wuhan lab, the lab for viruses. So
yes, the theory that would get people suspended from practically any Silicon Valley social media.
Yeah, it turns out it's a false truth. So it's true, but it's false at the same time. I mean, this might be a first in all of internet history, something that became unpersoned, an unsayable thing that has now come back, has been repersoned, and all of a sudden they were never away. This was always true. And how dare you say that something went wrong? I mean, it's amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible that the editorial policies of Silicon Valley and the media, informed by the media, have turned out to be hiding a truth.
So the first thing here is just the reporting at the Times, the CNN politics here, calls it CNN. President Trump contradicts the US intel community by claiming he's seen evidence that the coronavirus originated in a Chinese lab. So CNN saying, yeah, he's just talking nonsense here. He's contradicting the US intel community.
Well done, US intelligence community, for really being on top of that.
I love CNN here. We're journalists, which is why we trust the CIA.
Yes. they said, I mean...
Anyway, so we go to the next one here. This isn't the only time that they try to poo-poo. So Anthony Fauci just crushed Donald Trump's theory on the origins of coronavirus.
Oh, God, imagine taking Fauci seriously as a source of authority on anything. I mean, he is literally, if you were to lay out every position, he has held every single one of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely every single one of them. Often within only a few weeks of contradicting himself. It's incredible.
What's happened to the editorial standards as well? Because, I mean, at least CNN used to give the pretense of being a news organization. I mean, it's crushed Donald Trump. Like, it looks like a YouTube, SJW cringe compilation.
This guy's Chris Cillizza, and he does basically YouTube videos.
Editor-at-large for CNN.
Exactly. All he does is opinion pieces. So.
Oh, boy. I mean, we had a joke in the office about, like, renaming things and being like, yeah, leftist scum did this. But CNN's already beat us to it, I guess. So, anyway, so there's that. And then the next thing here is Donald Trump. So he spoke about this theory. As we mentioned, he said that he'd seen evidence of it. And if we can go to the clip of him, this is him saying exactly that.
Seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves because they're like the public relations agency for China. And this country pays them almost $500 million a year, and China pays them $38 million a year. And whether it's a lot or more, it doesn't matter. It's still, they shouldn't be making excuses when people make horrible mistakes, especially mistakes that are causing hundreds of thousands of people around the world to die. I think the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
Got Trump absolutely on the money there, isn't he?
I mean, your prophecy about him looking more and more golden by the minute.
I told you, he was right about everything.
I mean, it's almost like Alex Jones was right levels of, you look back and be like, oh, yeah, he was right.
Yeah, and like, it just amazes me how Donald Trump is literally ahead of the curve on all of these things. He's turned out, he proved to be right on a bunch of things, like, the economy, coronavirus, just international policy, foreign relations, all of these things. Everything that Donald Trump was doing was right. Everything that Joe Biden has been in opposition to Trump on the basis that it is oppositional to Trump, and it's all been wrong. And it's all turned out badly.
And as mentioned, in response to him saying that, the CNN were like, yeah, but what about what the CIA says? Which is...
well, why would I care about that?
Just you're completely talking nonsense. And Anthony Fauci has crushed Donald Trump's ridiculous theory until the evidence came out. And then all of a sudden, we have to go back. And we have to pretend that we never said that this didn't happen. So this is the Wall Street Journal reporting here. Intelligence on 6 staff at Wuhan lab fuels debate on COVID-19 origin.
I remember when this first started coming out and people were like, oh, no, that's nonsense. That's conspiracy theory. That's nonsense.
Wall Street Journal, conspiracy theorists.
Yep.
Report says researchers went to hospital in November 2019, shortly before confirmed outbreak, and add calls for probe of whether the virus escaped the lab. So a bunch of the people working at the virology lab got sick with COVID-19 symptoms, and this is obvious evidence that it may have come from the lab. But that's a conspiracy theory until it's not. And no, it was never a conspiracy theory. That's the thing, keep in mind. This was never a conspiracy theory now. That's how it works. In the same way that when someone's unpersoned in 1984, they never existed. Now they've been repersoned, they never not existed.
If the party determines it, then it is.
Yeah, so Hugo did some great reporting on this. So if we go to the next article, this is on lotus.com, listing the evidence. So the US House Intelligence Committee released a report with the specific claims. The claims first, that China has a history of research lab leaks resulting in infections. There were warnings from US diplomats in China as early as 2017 that the Wuhan lab was conducting dangerous research on coronaviruses without following the necessary safety protocols, risking an accidental outbreak of a pandemic. Which that's the claim. So gain of functions research being conducted at a Wuhan lab that made coronaviruses more infectious to humans, and also several researchers, as mentioned, in the lab were sick with COVID-19 like symptoms in fall 2019.
And have you seen? Oh, I should have got this for this segment. Have you seen Fauci talking about this?
I think I do later on. So
Right, okay.
So they also mentioned that the involvement of the Wuhan lab has the Chinese military involved, which has documented program for biological weapons, and there are multiple indications of attempts by Beijing to cover up the true circumstances of the COVID-19 outbreak because they don't want you to find out. Why would they not want you to find out if it's just some random animal? I mean, who cares? Some random animal create a virus.
Came from a bat.
Yeah, I mean, why would you want to cover that up? I mean, who cares? But if it came from a lab that your government's running and you're the ones engaging in dangerous research and risking leaks, that's something you might want to cover up.
I mean, quite early last year, I remember it being like discovered by the internet. In fact, this could have come from the wet market. And then it's like, well, look, a mile away is literally a laboratory that's researching these exact viruses. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's be real. Let's put two and two together. That would be, if you were an investigative detective, that would be the first place you'd look.
Yeah.
That's just...
I mean, that's what Donald Trump did, and then he's a conspiracy theorist for saying it. How dare he? So we go to the next one here. Of course, Biden now has ordered an investigation into whether or not this theory is true, because now it's always been true, comrades. It was never not true. So also, CNN has decided to blame President Trump for not investigating whether the Wuhan virus lab theory was to be taken seriously. It's amazing, isn't it? So we're going to play this clip, which is CNN saying that he didn't do enough.
This matters. Understanding where coronavirus and how the pandemic began matters. A lot of the discussion about the lab leak, I think, was clouded early on because there was the suggestion by some that it was somehow a Chinese weapon that caused this.
That'd be ridiculous.
That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a lab accident. But we've come a long way from people dismissing this as a conspiracy theory to a lot of people taking this seriously, Maggie.
We have, John, and look, I do think it's important to remember that part of the issue when this was first being reported on and discussed back a few months after the pandemic had begun was that then President Trump and Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, both suggested they had seen evidence that this was formed in a lab, and they also suggested it was not released on purpose, but they refused to release the evidence showing what it was. And so because of that made this instantly political. I think that it was, example 1000 when the Trump administration learned that when you have burned your own credibility over and over again, people are not immediately going to believe you, especially in an election year.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. As if they were sat there going, well, look, we approached you in good faith, Mr. Trump.
Which is why we titled our headlines, Anthony Fauci crushes Donald Trump.
Yeah, we gave you the benefit of the doubt, but you didn't provide us with any evidence. And so, what were we supposed to think? It's not that we went on a 4-year bender with 90% negative media coverage across the entire spectrum of media, trying to do everything we could to crush or usurp you from your position as the president. I mean, you give us a break. I hate it.
They also tried to dismiss that Trump and whatnot had claimed that it came from the lab by saying that, some people were claiming it was because of the Chinese weapons. And it's like, that's a possibility, but Trump didn't actually claim that.
No.
As you saw in the clip, he just says, no, there's evidence it came from the lab.
And to be honest with you, I wouldn't rule it out. Jesus.
So, I mean, also why rule it out? It's, things are possible. So also just in there, that we can't be expected to do journalism without the government telling us the news is essentially their attitude.
Yep.
Just if the CIA or the president hasn't given us the news, what are we meant to do? All we do is chew on pencils all day at CNN.
No, but that's exactly the crisis in modern journalism, is that they don't do journalism anymore. All they are is essentially a public relations outfit for whatever the authorities are around them. Oh, the FBI said this, the CIA said this, the CDC said this, what's the International Health Body again?
World Health Organization?
That's it. They said this, and therefore that's the end of our work. We log off, we just do all of our work on Twitter now. We get their Twitter out, they announce on Twitter, we take that, we put that into an article, and then we say, job done. That's journalism now.
Like your entire outlet is just a retweet.
Yeah.
That's it. Which,
Twitter aggregators. That's what modern journalists are.
Okay. Like for all the crap the failing New York Times gets, I have seen they still do occasionally like a really good piece in which they investigate a thing and tell you, hey, this evidence has come out and this and this, and we've been able to put together.
Wow.
But CNN, nah, just Donald Trump destroyed by Anthony Fauci. number 550. It really just sounds like a cringe compilation. So also the fact checkers. Remember, the fact checkers will come out in force. So there's Jack Posobiec listing here. So this is one of these fact checkers. New fact checker. What was the coronavirus accidentally released from a Wuhan lab? It's doubtful. And then there's another one where he's dunking on Ted Cruz for daring to say that it might have come from the lab. And the last one is just him saying, yeah, maybe it came from the lab.
How it suddenly became credible.
It utterly destroys. What's the point in a fact checker? Nothing, because they can't exist. It is a non-job. It is a thing that cannot make sense.
All they're here to do is confirm whatever it is that the cathedral has said about.
Like the orthodoxy, what the historian consensus is just true. For example, that's not how this works.
Yeah, we're here to confirm the orthodoxy. That's what they are.
That's not science. That's not investigation. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's just saying that what is currently being told is
It's
true.
propaganda.
Sure. I mean, the whole thing, what you're meant to do is come out and say, hey, there's new evidence to suggest that the orthodoxy might be wrong. But nah, fact checkers are just there to say that the orthodoxy is right, the orthodoxy is right, the orthodoxy is right. Because they can do nothing else. I mean, it's just Ministry of Truth. Anyway, so Facebook Ministry of Truth also has this problem because, of course, they rely on fact checkers. And yet they will censor you, as they previously did on this whole thing. Just want to mention here as well, which is just Anthony Fauci, as you said. Are you confident that the coronavirus 19 virus developed naturally? Dr. Fauci, no, I'm not convinced.
I mean, he literally was the voice they used, as Cizilla showed earlier. He was the voice they used to say, no, it obviously didn't come from a lab. Impossible, it came from a bat.
I mean, amazed. He's held both positions on this. What a man.
With unrivaled authority. That's the problem. I don't know why Fauci is given any credibility or time of day. He's obviously a liar, and I want to know whose payroll he's on, because I'm absolutely certain that he's being paid by someone.
Like, what is the point in having a health professional who tells you literally every opinion? That's not helpful. That's not an advisor. An advisor who tells you, yeah, I think this and this, but they're contradictory. And you literally, it's like a binary. Is this true or is this not true? They're like, yeah, both of them. But you're fired. Get someone else in.
But the thing is, he just seems to be so obviously lying when he's delivering his messages. He said, well, this and this. And it's like, yeah, but you said, well, I've just changed my mind. It's like, so you're just a weather vane.
Yeah.
You just point in the direction that the narrative is flowing.
So this chap here noticing that when you entertained this idea last year, you were deplatformed.
Yep.
Social media would just get rid of you. Although they've now changed that, as mentioned. So if you go to the next one here, this is just Facebook saying that they won't crack down. They're no longer treating man-made COVID as a crackpot idea. So
social media platforms should not have editorial policies. They should not be able to crack down on crackpot ideas. All ideas can be considered crackpot.
Everyone warned you about this. If you make yourselves the arbiter of truth, you will run into a situation where you decided something was true and then it turns out not to be. And then you will have egg on your face, as has happened with Hunter Biden, as has now happened with this, as has happened with a million things you can probably think of things where Facebook's like, nah, that's totally nonsense. And it just turns out to be true, and then what?
Look at the rod you've made for your own backs.
Awful. I mean, people should really feel awful about this, but they won't, will they? But there's another argument, which is, yeah, but if you think it came from a lab, you racist. What a defense. So you posted this on your Facebook page. Do you want to read this?
Yeah, so this is the New York Times reporter who was tasked in covering the coronavirus, Apoorva Mandavili, and she said, someday we will stop talking about the lab leak theory and maybe even admit its racist roots, but alas, that day is not yet here. No, that day is not yet here. It seems that actually the lab leak theory may well be true, and I don't see how you can call that racist, but, I don't work for the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, this is one wokeness to your brain, but you know what is racist? Being woke. So, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to go into more detail because I think it's absolutely hilarious, which is the stamps. So we go back to the stamps. This is the Washington Post posting here. Spain's postal service introduces skin tone stamps to fight racism and makes the whitest ones the most valuable. Yeah. So they say, just the fact that, this is obviously coming from a race and gender socialist perspective, the wokest perspective, which is that we need to highlight the inequalities between races, and therefore they've made different prices for the different skin tones. I mean, you can't pin this on anyone else, you can't pin this on the liberals, you can't pin this on the conservatives, you can't pin this on anyone except the progressives. It's entirely your will.
You wanted race stamps. Just remember that.
Yeah. So they say in here, the darker the stamp, the less value it will have. The state-owned company called Ceros said in the news among its announcing its launch. So the company that did this, that's what they said. The darker the stamp, the less value it will have. Sling and Brave.
Therefore, when making a shipment, it will be necessary to use more black stamps than white ones. That way, each letter in each shipment will become a reflection of the inequality created by racism. I mean,
What a defense.
Yeah, look, we're literally creating a bunch of racist stamps, and that will show that society is racist.
It's like, look,
Suppose it will.
I love how the progressives in Spain are like, there's no racism. Right, we'll create some, and then that'll demonstrate that there's racism in society. Yeah, well, I mean, million IQ take.
Just literally on purpose, they've created racist stamps.
Didn't
I
have
didn't
to.
even know that. I hadn't looked into this.
So they also say in releasing the stamps, Carreros collaborated with SOS Racismo, a federation of Spanish anti-racism non-governmental organizations. So, of course, the anti-racist part.
Yeah, the anti-racist created a nice series of racism.
Yeah. In a statement, SOS Racismo said campaign's intention was to make this reality of racial discrimination visible.
Well, I mean, you did.
I mean, if you make racial discrimination, you certainly will make it visible. Like, the next campaign for SOS Racismo is to just shout the N-word at everyone crossing the border. Look at the racism. We filmed ourselves screaming the N-word at massive random black
I love
guys.
that a government-owned company literally has an active policy of racism. We're the anti-racists.
I think they're a non-governmental organization, but
I thought they were owned by the
like for the next thing they're going to do, they're going to set up a live stream. They're going to hire some black guy, have him sit in the chair, and the white guy sit in the chair opposite, film him, and just have the white guy scream the N-word 24/7 in this live stream, and this will demonstrate the visibleness of racism in our society. I mean, it's such amazing thinking. Oh boy! So they continue to try and defend themselves. We have seen it these days in what is it, Sueta. Still not going to get it right, Spaniards.
Yeah.
So the place in which a bunch of migrants are trying to cross unduly.
Yes. A place where a bunch of people who weren't black were trying to get into Spain.
Yeah, because Gibbs' job.
Yeah.
There was no war they're fleeing
So,
from.
Black Lives Matter, go on.
So we have seen it these days in Ceuta. We see it every day in the Mediterranean. In the growing xenophobic and racist discourses that are taking hold in Europe.
What I love about this, right, before I go on, like, if you look at, like, just the genes of the Mediterranean, if you look at, like, a haplogroup map, it's basically all the same. Basically, it's just the same genetic pool in the Mediterranean. So it's like, oh, we're being racist to those people who are exactly the same as us, but just live in a different country.
I love it. Don't worry, Spanish SOS Racismo. We the English are here to tell you, you're not white anyway. So who cares?
Yeah.
You're about as white as the Moroccans to us. So
I'm not even joking. That's true.
yeah, I mean your genetics as well. You know.
Like,
So anyway,
identical.
also just the idea that there's xenophobic and racist discourse taking hold in Europe by us at SOS Racismo, so we need to demonstrate it again. I mean, what a way to think. So in a news release accompanying the introduction of the stamps, it said they were timed to coincide with the commemoration of European Diversity Month and the first anniversary of George Floyd's death on Tuesday. They did this to celebrate George Floyd Day. They put out racist stamps of different prices depending on your skin tone. Oh man, it's so comical. I can't get over it. I mean, what reminds me of as well is the Ottoman slave trade. Because I don't know if you know, but when they used to sell slaves, there's a listing somewhere. I'll have to find it. Where they list if you want a sub-Saharan, it's this price. Arab girl, it's this price. And it was like Ukrainians were the highest price. And
Really?
it's literally like the stamp system in which.
God.
So
Oh, God.
God, yeah. I don't really have anything else to say, but that's real racism, unlike just saying that the virus came from the lab, which is not racism. It's just something that's come back to being a false truth, I guess. Thanks, Facebook.
And just to be clear, we don't know that the virus came from the lab. It's just that it seems to be a viable theory.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more disgusted by the fact of this is totally false, ban it, and now it's been repersoned, and now it's never not been false.
Yeah, I mean, we have no particular insider information or anything. It just seems like it could be a strong theory because, I mean, they do have a lab in Wuhan doing experiments on novel coronaviruses with the intent of making them more transmissible to humans using, what was it, humanized mice? It's like, okay, well, it definitely didn't come from the lab. Okay, thanks, Fauci. You know, thanks for that input.
But at the same time, Dr. Fauci,
I guess
I'm not convinced it didn't come from the lab.
Yeah, I guess he got his 2 stacks and then they stopped giving them or something. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.